Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, we got some interesting news out of the DC camp today. Yeah, not something we normally cover. We are horror centric, but it just so happens that DC themselves, and we're talking DC Comics, owned by Warner Brothers, all that good shit. Yeah, they're doing a big shakeup. So if you've been in the pop culture zeitgeist for a minute, you know that James Gunn is over there. Him and Peter Safran, they're taking over everything, and they are restructuring and restarting the entire DCEU. So it's just one of those things where it's like, what are we gonna do when it comes to new properties? Are we starting over fresh? Are we picking things back up? These have been the questions. And today we got some answers. We're not going to go through the whole DC slate. Obviously, we have one thing and then another thing I'm going to kind of surprise Luke with because I know he is very out of the water on everything but the current topic, which is Swamp Thing. Yes, they did
Yes.
announce a new Swamp Thing movie. And yeah, that we don't really have a release date, but we know that it is up on the slate for this first part of phase one, as they're calling it. It's going under the moniker of Gods and Monsters. But Luke, why don't you get things started? What's the significance of Swamp Thing here for us?
Oh man. Well, and going into first, my background with Swamp Thing. I have a love for the '80s film, the Wes Craven film. It's something I watched as a kid continuously. It seemed like it was always on TV, and I had a few action figures of Swamp Thing, so I absolutely loved the original film. And then, I had seen its sequel a handful of times. Um, not as much love for that one. It's not horrible. I mean, it's kind of in the same vein, but and then jumping into the TV series that came out a couple of years ago, that was something that I was very excited about. And then I believe I picked that one up on Blu-ray and I got the digital for it. And I think this was during COVID, wasn't it?
Yep, this was during COVID.
And I think I watched it first, and then I think I told you I highly recommend it.
You did. You were very excited about it, and it was one of those
Yes.
ones where I wanted to try it, but at the time I didn't have like cable television,
Yeah.
so it was premiering on, was it the CW or something
Yes.
like
Yep.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why it was like going into it, I wanted to see it, but I didn't have high hopes for it. And then actually diving into it, I was surprised heavily at the quality of it. It really blew me away. And then
Mm-hmm.
just continuously following it, I binged it within a couple days. And then
Yep.
I think I may have waited until I finished it up before I said anything to you. I just remember sending a text after work and telling you, you have to check it out when you have the time. And then I don't know, did you check it out immediately after that, or
I
was it
think
a
I
little bit?
did. As soon
Oh,
as you told me, I started watching because that's all I had was time. I was playing fucking Apex Legends for 8 hours a day because you work in the medical field, so you were still, going to work doing your thing. I had the luxury of getting home to sit on my ass and play video games. So I was like, yeah, I'll watch Swamp Thing. And just like you, I was impressed. I enjoyed the character of Swamp Thing growing up. He was always cool, but he was always on the outside, for me, of course, I had all the big ones, the whole Justice League,
yep.
everything. And he didn't really show up in the shows that I would watch because I'd watch a lot of like Justice League animated and, Batman Beyond and the original Batman the animated series. So like that was kind of my realm. And then even getting a little older, we get into like the Dark Knight trilogy and the Arkham games and then Man of Steel. So it's like I kind of stayed around it, but I always thought he was intriguing. As you guys know, I'm a massive creature feature fan. One of my favorite Avengers, if we're going to the Marvel side, is Hulk. So it's kind of like big green monster should sell really well for me. And yeah, I had never seen the Wes Craven films. I still haven't. I want to, or at least the film and then the sequel. But
It's
this
coming out on
show,
4K.
yes, both of them. This show was really my first full exposure, and that just sent me on like a dive into Swamp Thing's history and background just while watching the show and like looking up comic book issues and stuff, getting PDFs and things and flipping through them. It's all very interesting stuff, and it really made me fall in love with the character. So this film being announced is pretty damn exciting because it's one of the last things I would have expected DC to come right out of the gate with.
Yeah, I know. This being grouped into the heavyweights that is in that article blurb is pretty surprising that they're putting this as a priority because looking at a lot of the characters, we all get the main players from DC as well as Marvel, and then I think you're with me on the same page where it's like you start finding a love for the lesser known characters, and then
Hmm.
once they kind of get the spotlight, you really get a nice emphasis put on it, and you get really excited about it, especially when they have a darker tone. I mean, during our October, we kind of really dove into Werewolf by Night, and that was kind of a lesser known property by people, and it was something so different and so unique, and such a lesser known story that I think I know we certainly enjoyed it, but I think that's why a lot of people enjoyed it. It was something fresh, something new, different tone. And I think that's what we'll get for Swamp Thing here. I know in the article they said, I think James Gunn had mentioned that he wants everything to kind of be tonally different and kind of seeing how all those kind of meld together when all the characters end up intertwining. And I think that's going to be very interesting here as they're going to put a horror spin on this because I think Swamp Thing in the TV series, there's certainly a lot of horror elements into it, but I think doing a feature length film like this, I think you can really turn that dial up and really get dark with it.
I absolutely agree. And like the exact quote here is when they talk about going through Swamp Thing. It's easily the most extreme example of, and this is just a Variety article tidbit, but easily the most extreme example of Gunn and Safran's conviction to diversifying the DCEU. Swamp Thing will investigate the dark origins of Swamp Thing, Safran said, through the prism of horror. So it's going to be an origin story, which is great because I think the TV show did a great job
Yes.
of doing that. And I think that needs to get to a bigger audience because I think the thing that's a shame about that, and I know it can't be the quality of the show because the show is just too good in our opinion and a lot of people's opinion. But it was canceled after the first episode premiered.
Yes.
So I think it was just expense. I think because of that
Yeah.
practical suit and everything, because like the show is so damn good. So to see this get the big screen treatment is going to be great because it's like at least it's all self-contained and we can get it out there. By the way of explaining further, Gunn referenced the initial reaction to the Guardians of the Galaxy joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the initial question about how Rocket Raccoon would stand next to Thor. That mashup quality wound up being one of the highlights of Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, Gunn argued. Gunn said they're one-upping that approach with Swamp Thing. This is much more of a horrific film, but will still have Swamp Thing interact with other characters. So they're kind of saying, and I know in another article they go a little deeper with this, is that Swamp Thing is very much going to be an origin story, and it's very much going to be kind of in its own section of the DC EU for a little while at least. But he's going to start crossing in very slowly, I think, with other characters because like he works with like John Constantine, the Justice League Dark. He becomes a part of at one point. There's a lot of great things that Swamp Thing gets kind of introduced in, but you never really see him working with any of the real big guys. So like I totally see this working more with like kind of like a Suicide Squad kind of thing where he's like
Yeah.
with some C and B level characters as opposed to Swamp Thing and Superman teaming up. Like I would be down for it, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to pair him with anyone that can really, it would be put him in danger of overshadowing him. I think you're kind of put him on the same level playing field with a lot of the other characters that maybe we don't see that often, which I'm absolutely there for. It's like the TV series we speak highly of, and I think a lot of people did see it, but I think a lot of people didn't see it. So, kind of starting from the origins here, it pains me that we're not getting either a season 2 or a continuation of the TV series, just because I think the casting was so well done there. And just that storytelling and that story arc from the first season was very well done as well. But I do think like I'm excited to relive it, and see a different spin put on it. And on my back shelf there, I have a couple of different volumes of the Alan Moore comics for Swamp Thing. So it's like I know there's a lot of different routes you can go and a lot of different spins you can put on this. I'm excited to see what kind of characters are going to meld into this, especially in that first film. And I know they did cite it as it was very expensive for that first season. So, I think maybe we'll get a lot of mileage out of the feature length film here because it's like, you don't have the task of producing 10 or 12 different episodes all an hour long, where this one we can kind of just put it an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then hey, a couple years later dust everything back off and and tell another tale with Swamp Thing. So I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. I think the franchise is going to have a lot of potential, and I think as soon as, with the significance that horror is playing a big role in, just the theater and the box office experience lately, I think Swamp Thing is going to be something that I think a lot of audiences that don't understand what Swamp Thing is, once they go and see it, I think they're going to just be enthralled with the character and the origin itself.
Absolutely. Now, I'd love to see someone like Derek Mears come back and play Swamp Thing. I think that he was
Absolutely.
perfect in the show. I know that they're kind of trying to distance themselves from all the previous DC stuff that we've gotten over the last few years, but I know that there's going to be some exceptions to the rule with certain characters. And I think this should be one of them because I think that he's not only is he the right height, right build, but he did bring a lot of emotion to the character. I
Yeah.
mean, really, it's his performance through probably 80% of it, and then like his human form is a different actor who's only there for a couple flashbacks and basically the first episode. So then the rest of it's Derek Mears, really. And I think he did a fantastic job. But other than casting for him, I gotta know, who do you think should direct this?
Oh man. Like, are you asking anyone in the world I could have direct it, like an unrealistic,
I
or
want
would?
to I want a somewhat grounded take because I think I've got one that's real easy. It's a softball pitch, but I have backing for it.
Okay, I mean, like, let me go unrealistic. I don't think he would ever do it. A Guillermo del Toro, I think, would be a very intriguing pick. I think he could do so well, especially how Hellboy turned
I
out.
I don't think that's too far off because Guillermo was attached to do a Justice League Dark.
If we could get him, he would be my ideal pick. I think that one would be so well done. I mean, that's my dream. Like,
Mm,
if we're gonna do a Swamp Thing and I'm gonna have a pick of a director, he's my A+ player. I'm picking him right out of the gate.
all right.
Another guy maybe that I could see doing this would be maybe a Dan Trachtenberg. Um, just
Okay.
with the kind of the storytelling of like 10 Cloverfield Lane. Then obviously he's worked with monsters. In Prey, I think it could be really interesting to kind of see him go out there and kind of meld this story together. But it's like, you know, um, I don't know. We have our usual suspects, but also I'd be intrigued to see someone new come out. I mean, we talked about Werewolf by Night, and I believe, what is his name, Michael Giacchino,
Hmm.
came out, and we didn't know what to expect with that, and he knocked that one out of the park. So it's like, obviously my dream, Guillermo del Toro. Other than that, I'd also be intrigued to see someone new take a stab at this stuff.
Awesome. Now I'm telling you, I'm gonna put money on it right now. $5 with you saying that it's going to be James Wan.
Well, okay, yeah, James Wan, like I had thought about it and I just wasn't, because I knew he was so heavily attached to the TV series. That's why I didn't pick him. I just feel, again, I feel like it would
Now,
be.
I think the reason for that is because he was very upset when the TV show, uh, got canceled. That was one of his babies that he shepherded to the altar there. He has already done the Aquaman movies. He's already brought $1 billion film to them, and I think that it just makes sense that if he comes on board, it's like he's already in the Warner Brothers wheelhouse. He does all his films with Warner Brothers. To me, it just makes sense for him to be able to take that bigger stab. Now that he can, once he's done with Aquaman, and he can just say, hey, here's your second chance, take Swamp Thing and run with it. I think it makes the most sense. I
No,
think
yeah.
like that's probably the most realistic answer. Would I like Guillermo and Dan Trachtenberg? I'd be happy with either of those. But I think that this is going to be where it goes.
No, yeah. And I guess I should probably, put a little asterisk there as this had come out. And I guess for me, my default setting went to James Wan. And I was like, wow, they're probably not going to do James Wan because of his heavily attached to the TV series, and they were kind of trying to unmarry themselves from it. So it's like, if James Wan's on the table, I feel like he's going to probably be the guy, since he does have a love for it. And like you're saying, there's a lot of positives to it. I think, and again, you can't go wrong with James Wan, I think, being attached to
It
this as
feels
well.
very Sam Raimi to me because
Yes.
it's like you have that multiverse of madness symbiosis with like They leaned a little bit into horror with that one, like not very. This is going to lean harder, and I think that you already have someone who's made Aquaman and has made a medley of horror films, so it's like it does seem to me like the smartest pick in the
And
bunch. The next person I would pick would probably be James Gunn himself, just
yeah,
because it's an off the beaten path character. It's a little stranger. It's definitely something that hasn't been given as much spotlight as I think the character should have in the modern day. And I think that he would just, with what he did with Suicide Squad and Peacemaker and Guardians, like he's ripe for this. But I think he's going to do Superman. So
yeah.
he'll be
Hey,
too busy.
hey, put him in anything that's going to get Michael Rooker some work. So I mean,
Michael Rooker as Swamp Thing.
There we go. Perfect.
Too
No,
short, but hey, it would be great, right?
we'll just paint him green. He's already bald, so
Absolutely.
safety on the effects.
He's going to be in this somehow. I would love
Absolutely.
it. He's probably, honestly, what if he plays fucking, oh my god, what's Superman's dad on the farm? Do you know his name?
No.
All right, his Earth dad. Is that's going to be Michael Rooker.
There we go. Hey,
I'm telling you.
I'm here for any of it. So any Michael Rooker content, I'm good. I'm good.
Absolutely. But alrighty, I know I teased to you that I had another piece before we wrap up here that I think you're going to be very interested in. Are you familiar with Creature Commandos?
No.
I didn't know about this either until this afternoon, but this comes from Variety. This is the first piece of television they announced. The animated series Creature Commandos for HBO Max is the very first project greenlit by Safran and Gunn, who has written every episode. The show is already in production. So that's just, Gunn is behind all the writing and everything. So the Creature Commandos characters were first launched in 1980. The premise features Frankenstein's monster teaming up with a werewolf and a vampire and a Gorgon to fight Nazis in World War II. It doesn't appear that Gunn's version takes quite the same approach. Weasel, one of the characters from Gunn's 2021 film, The Suicide Squad, is one of the commandos, along with Rick Flag's father, Rick Flag Sr. Animation, Gunn said, will allow their creative collaborators to tell stories that are gigantic without spending, $50 million an episode. And then he goes on to say, crucially, Gunn said that the actors cast to voice the characters on the show will also play the roles in live action later in the DCU. So how does that get your brain thinking there?
Hold on a second. Are they saying Frankenstein's monster and a werewolf and a vampire in it as well as Weasel? Or are they saying instead of Frankenstein's
This is
monster?
our lineup. This is what our lineup looks like at the moment.
Oh my god, this is perfect.
Isn't this fucking cool?
Yeah, I mean, oh my gosh. When is this coming out? Or they don't have
This
a
is
release?
this is the first thing that's greenlit. It's already in production. It's already like on the board. This is concept art. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that they're saying and people are alluding to, that this would be the kind of stuff that you get Swamp Thing to cross over into.
Absolutely.
Is this stuff. And yeah, I figured that this would definitely tickle your fancy. We're going to have to check this out. We might have to do Primetime Terrors for this one
Absolutely.
when it comes
Or
out. But
pencil
yeah,
this one in.
I love it. And I think that they will incorporate a werewolf and everything. But Weasel was one of my favorite additions to the
Yes.
Suicide Squad. He was so funny. But yeah, no, I figured you'd like this. And I mean, they got to have Joel Kinnaman come back and play his dad. I thought
Oh
he
my
was
god.
so fucking good as Rick
Wait, is this
Flag
going to
in the
be live
Goonies.
action?
This is going to be animated.
Okay, that's what I was
But
curious. Okay.
the characters are slated to show up in live action properties later down the road.
That's perfect.
Yep, and like
I'm
you said,
excited for this.
like they said, they didn't announce any casting, but everybody who is cast in this is going to their voice. They are going to play the live action version as well.
Okay,
so
wonderful.
you can expect some pretty decent sized names, I think, attached to this. So
I'm very intrigued.
I know. I figured you would. I'm glad that you didn't know anything about that. So that way it was a nice little surprise. But yeah, I mean, those are two horror adjacent kind of properties there that DC brought out for us today. They really showed up. And I mean, of course, I'm excited to see the Bat family come to screen with Brave and the Bold. I'm excited for Superman Legacy. I'm even really looking forward to the Authority. I thought that sounds really cool. I like the direction where all of this is going. I think that this all sounds like good stuff, but yeah, we had to get on and just highlight some of the horror bits that we got to feast our eyes on, and I can't wait for, man. Swamp Thing, Creature Commandos, this is all really cool and interesting, good comic book shit.
You know, like James Gunn mentioned in that article, they're gonna lean into the tonally different aspects of a lot of these different characters. So I'm very excited. I mean, like when they say, you know, it's going to be more horror centric for Swamp Thing, I think it's really showing that they're not afraid to take different approaches to a lot of these characters rather than kind of just a vanilla slate of this is basically what we have to fit everything into this kind of blueprint that we have through all these films. It's like I'm expecting something very diverse with the DC universe here. It's something that, you know, it's no secret that they've struggled to kind of keep up with Marvel. So I'm excited to see what we're going to get here. I'm glad Swamp Thing is becoming a priority, at least in this first wave here, because I do think a lot of people will latch on to this character once he's brought to the mainstream and into the theater. So I'm excited to see where this is going to lead, and I will be buying all the Swamp Thing merchandise.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. I already have the DC multiverse figure, but I'm sure I'll get the movie figure. I'd love for them to do the TV version.
Yes.
It'll be great. And I think that that's going to get, you're going to get a lot of people coming out of the woodwork as this gets closer, talking about the show. And I think a lot more people are going to get eyes on that as it goes along. Because even though it's one season, it's so good. Like, it's so worth a watch. Just if you want some really, if you want to see how high quality, just from a storytelling standpoint and effects standpoint, that Swamp Thing can be, see the true potential, that is the best representation we have right now. So,
Absolutely.
but alrighty, guys, I think that's going to wrap us up here for the Swamp Thing and Creature Commando coverage. Definitely lots of fun stuff coming from DC. More great news for horror fans and hero fans alike. Yeah, I can't wait for this. But other than that, we do have a good bit of stuff going on the channel. We did just check out the 3rd episode of The Last of Us, so we have that episode up now, as well as some great content coming to you guys later this week. So keep your eyes on that. And yeah, we're going to be seeing Knock at the Cabin by the end of this week. So we'll have a review up for that as well. Lots of fun stuff as always. So yeah, just keep an eye on us. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. But alrighty, guys, that's going to about wrap us up. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.